Welcome back to the Your Health Radio and Television program. My name is Emily Sciolto from the Monterey County Health Department. For the last 40 minutes or so, we've been discussing smoking and its less than glamorous appeal. We've heard about why people smoke and the many potential harms caused by smoking. We've learned about why it's so difficult to quit and about the many available tools and medications that can assist in quitting. Now we'll broaden our focus a bit and explore some community-wide issues related to shared outdoor spaces and environments and how smoking poses a threat to all non-smokers in these shared spaces. I'd like to welcome the Tobacco Control Program Coordinator from the Monterey County Health Department, Mr. Gonzalo Coronado. Thanks, Gonzalo. Welcome.
Hi, Emily. Thank you, and thank you for inviting me.
Oh, of course. So what's the deal with smoking in shared spaces? Why is this bad?
Well, you would think that would be less dangerous, but there's been studies shown, and one in particular from Stanford University, Professor Klepsis did this recently, I believe in 2008, where he studied smoking indoors and outdoors. And it's just as dangerous outdoors than it is indoors. And if those of you who have been near a smoker downwind, you know that there is no escaping it. And as a matter of fact, because you're outdoors, it might be even more toxic because you have other pollution, the general pollution that's outside. So not only are you compounding, the pollution levels and also the secondhand smoke.
So secondhand smoke, that's what folks in shared outdoor spaces are griping about around smokers.
Yes, and I think I'd like to also introduce a concept of third-hand smoke, which is relatively new, but that is similar. In layman's terms, it's the particulates that land on your clothes and that you carry with you and people can smell. And I like to give the example of, when you smoke outside, you still have that penetrated in your skin and your clothes. You're still breathing it out for a while. And then imagine that you're holding a newborn baby that's a few months old. Just imagine the tiny lungs that they have and how fragile they are. And I think people get the picture that you are contaminating the atmosphere.
Yeah, as a female, I know the first thing that comes to mind is hair. The smell of smoke and whatever particles from the cigarette on the hair. And then if I have, I can see how it would get to
right.
a little baby. So is secondhand smoke and even thirdhand smoke exposure really that harmful in outdoor areas?
Well, I believe Dr. Hernandez might have mentioned, but over 46,000 Americans die from exposure to secondhand smoke in the United States on an annual basis. And not to be told is how many hospitalizations, for example, children with ear infections, bronchitis, pneumonia, asthma attacks, and so forth.
So the answer pretty much is yes. Yes, I believe secondhand smoke exposure
and
is
just to underline the point, the U.S. Surgeon General in 2006 said there is no risk-free level of exposure to secondhand smoke. And also in the same year, as a matter of fact, the California Air Resources Board mentioned that secondhand smoke is a toxic air contaminant.
So let's talk about that then. Is it legal to prohibit smoking in outdoor areas even, of restaurants, shopping centers, and other private businesses?
Right, those will be the more common ones. And yes, it is legal, and governments have been doing that for any businesses right now. Government has the ability to restrict and as far as zoning, an example would be zoning ordinances that people have. You just can't put any type of business anywhere. So you can restrict what kind of businesses go where and under what conditions those businesses will operate.
Including smoking?
Including smoking.
Inside or out of the business, right. It sounds like. So won't smoking restrictions in outdoor areas of restaurants and shopping centers and other, like downtown sort of areas cause consumers to dine and shop elsewhere in other areas?
That's a concern that happens, if you recall, from what I recall and from research that I've done, in 1994 when California led the country in banning smoking in bars and restaurants, that was the big issue that, bars are going to close, their restaurants are going to close, and that did not happen. There's studies show that business either increased or stayed the same.
Yeah, I know of plenty bars and restaurants with no smoking. Smoking is not prohibited inside or outside on like the patio area or whatever. They're still open. They seem to be thriving. Right. Another kind of concern I've heard is regarding prohibiting smoking in outdoor spaces. Won't smoking regulations in all these outdoor areas cause valuable police or law enforcement resources to be spent responding to these
right.
smoking issues rather than doing other things?
Right, that's a good question, and the intent of most of these laws are for them to be self-enforcing. Usually the public enforces them. Most smokers, if you have an adequate signage and they're aware of the laws, they would be happy to oblige with the current laws of that city or county.
I see. So it's more self-contained.
It's self-enforcement, and the primary mechanisms would be education and signage. But it's also important to have ordinance in place that does have some teeth into it. So in case there are people, very rarely that we'll find people who just have total disregard for the law, and then that way you have a mechanism to fine or cite those people.
Right. So most I can see definitely, and I see it happen, you know, as often as I see someone smoking where they probably shouldn't be smoking, someone else saying, oh, that bothers me, please go, you know, wherever and do whatever. So as a matter of fact, non-smokers are the police, really, sounds like in some cases.
Right. And most smokers do want to do the right thing. So.
True. So should local communities wait for the state legislature to take some sort of overarching action on this issue? Or can local communities go ahead and create an ordinance like you've mentioned and prohibit smoking in these places?
Yeah, currently over 37 jurisdictions, which I mean, when I say that I mean cities and counties across the state, have adopted pretty strict ordinances which cover a lot of different areas. And there's probably hundreds more that have adopted less restrictive banning of smoking in certain areas. So it's not the best idea to wait for the state legislator, because there's no guarantee that they're going to do something in the time frame that you would like them to do. So that's why a lot of communities are doing this on their own.
And if you have the momentum and you know things going for you in the community, it's best just to go on ahead.
Right. Every community is different, as we can see even in our own Monterey County. There's different needs and different wants from the community. So those would take precedent.
Understandable. So why should smoking be banned in parks and other large outdoor areas when there's enough room for smokers maybe to not smoke in close proximity to other people? You know, they don't, if there's plenty of room and the smoker can be over in this area, not even, you know, close to the other people.
Right. Well, I think there's a couple of points I want to bring up. One is that smoking does harm the smoker, the non-smoker, and also the environment. There's litter. The litter is the number one, cigarette butts are the number one litter item found on beaches. And in our community, where we rely so much on tourism, it's really important that we have very clean beaches. And as I mentioned before, you know, secondhand smoke, if you're downwind from someone who's smoking, it doesn't matter if you're outdoors, it's like they're right next to you. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's, you know, that does not mean to say that they should not be any, they should perhaps consider the designation of certain smoking areas for those who do smoke.
True. I see. So, and I can even attest personally, when I did a beach cleanup on, you know, Earth Day or whatnot, my back was sore for like a week or two after that because of all the cigarette butts I had to bend over and pick up one after the other. It seemed like they were just coming. You dig and you find cigarette butts somehow.
Right. The Coalition for Tobacco-Free Monterey County is participating in many of those, and that is the number one thing that we pick up. And it's not so, it's also the litter that's a harms, you know, to the tourism, but it can also harm wildlife also, birds and fish and so forth. And cigarette butts last a very long time. They're made from plastic, and they don't disintegrate quickly.
Oh, wow. That would not be a very good meal.
And also, when you have a child playing in the sand and they're chewing on a cigarette butt, that also happens also.
Oh. Unfortunately, there's no photos of those, of anything like that we have today. But can you tell me what's happening, is there, if anything, locally in this way? Are there any of these ordinances, you know, happening in any of the cities or jurisdictions in Monterey County? Any movements being made by any of the cities to ban smoking in shared outdoor areas or any sort of
I have.
ordinance?
The city of Carmel, I'll give you a few examples. The city of Carmel is one, and 2-3 years ago, they originally had a smoking ban on their beaches, and a few years ago they went back and they added all their parks and their theater to be smoke-free also. And they all, I believe that part of the reason was that they looked at it also as we haven't spoken about this, the risk of fire. And if you think of the forests that we live in, some of those in this community, that's a big potential for a major fire.
Yeah,
so
when you think about Big Sur.
Big Sur, Carmel, Pacific Grove. So that was one city that did go beyond. And more recently, the city of Monterey, also they banned smoking on the rec trail and some of their parking structures and service lines, that would be the ATM line or the movie theater line.
Oh.
And they also closed some loopholes in the existing California workers safety workers law there were some loopholes, and they were able to close those loopholes.
Making prohibiting smokers or cigarette smoke in any way from getting to employees of a...
Right, there were some exceptions, real minor exceptions, but nonetheless there were exceptions, and they closed those.
And just for clarification too, you mentioned rec trail. You're talking about the trail alongside the ocean, pretty much from Pacific Grove all the way to Marina or wherever.
Seaside, right.
So there's no smoking there on that trail?
On the rec trail. Yes.
Very good. And then some other local examples. I've heard you mention Pacific Grove just adopted an ordinance recently.
What they did is they voted and approved to request that the city attorney draft an ordinance banning smoking in certain areas. And as a matter of fact, on Wednesday, November 17th, they will be receiving that draft language, and that would ban smoking in their open spaces, on the ocean front, and their parks.
Okay.
And so that would be the first step there, and I'm sure there will be a negotiation and discussion as far as if there will be any exceptions and what kind of exceptions there will be.
Interesting. So this week we not only have that draft language going before the Pacific Grove Board, we also have the Great American Smokeout on Thursday.
Yes.
And that pretty much means, I don't think we've even mentioned what that means. You're supposed to quit, or you're encouraged to quit smoking for 24 hours for the Great American Smokeout,
Right.
correct?
And people can get more information from the American Cancer Society website, and also I'm sure if you do Great America Smokeout in your search engine, you will find more information on that.
Oh, great.
But yeah. And if I can touch back on your previous question, also the Board of Supervisors of Monterey County, one of their Health and Human Services Subcommittee is also revising or considering revising their smoking ordinances, and they're going to be hearing December 10th on recommendations on where smoking can or should be prohibited in Monterey County. This would be the unincorporated areas, and I think they're primarily looking at perhaps parks, rec trails, and so forth.
So the areas that aren't sort of governed by the
Other cities. Right.
Okay. So they're really leaving no nook and cranny unturned there. They're trying to...
Well, there's a lot. So I think here in Monterey County, we're just beginning. There are some other cities across the state that they ban smoking everywhere.
Oh.
Yeah. So
Okay. So it sounds like...
We're starting.
And it sounds like, one of the questions too, of course, coming from smokers that I've heard is, if smoking's banned in all these outdoor places, will smokers have anywhere left to smoke?
Right. And that's for, like I mentioned, one example, or a few cities like Calabasas, El Cajon have some very comprehensive smoking prohibitions across the state. And that's up to each community to decide among themselves and to convey to the elected officials what they feel is fair. And obviously anything that has proper signage, where there is a media campaign attached to it, I think will find success.
So smokers do still have a place to go, and as I asked you the question, I thought maybe, well, yeah, in their house, but that's actually not even true in some cases, correct?
In some cases, they are banning the smoking in some multi-unit housing areas, and here we've seen that on a voluntary basis, but not from a government point of view.
Okay. But still, I think it's definitely smokers beware,
Well, it's not so much smokers beware as it is as people need to take care of their health. And a big example that as a tobacco control program, I get phone calls from the community. And the real frustrating one is where you have a child with asthma and whose asthma is made worse by somebody else's cigarette smoke. And there's nowhere to go or nothing to do about that. That's a dilemma that we need to address.
Yeah, in terms of that person's health as well as the health of their neighbors.
Yeah.
Almost in some cases quite literally their neighbors. I think that's about all the time that we'll have today, Gonzalo. Thank you so much for being on the program with us.
Well, that went by very fast.
Oh, didn't it? It's been a great discussion. I want to thank our audience for being with us today, and I especially want to thank my guests, Mr. Coronado here, Ms. Ida Corby, and Dr. Lisa Hernandez. Thank you all so much. What a great local expertise space we have here. We're all really lucky. So signing off, I'm Emily Sciolto, Associate Public Health Information Officer from the Monterey County Health Department, and I've been your host today. Don't forget that the Your Health radio and television program is on every weekday afternoon from 4 to 5. Thanks again and see you next time.